Well, I have worked here at the National Embryo Donation Center for 6 years, and I've never heard of anything like this happening. Just an amazing story to share with you today. I'm Mark Mellinger, Marketing and Development Director for the National Embryo Donation Center, the NEDC. And this is the Embryo Adoption Podcast, brought to you by the NEDC. You can find out more about us by going to embryodonation.org. That's our website, embryodonation.org. And I'm joined today by one of our pregnant couples, Perry and Sydney Walden. It is so good to have you two here. And this really is an amazing story. A lot of times people will talk about the miraculous happening, and it's just hyperbole. What they're talking about may be amazing, may be unlikely, but it's really not a miracle. This, I would say, at least borders on the miraculous. It borders on supernatural intervention. So let's just go ahead and get right to it, you two. Let's start by talking about the process of your most recent frozen embryo transfer at the NEDC, because you had, I don't think you mind me sharing, that you had come through once and that transfer was not successful. It was a chemical pregnancy. That's always very, very hard. And we can maybe talk about that later. But then you came back for your second. Go ahead and take it from there.
Yeah, so I think anybody who's had multiple transfers, the second one was more nerve-wracking than the first one. I feel like the first one was filled with a lot of hope and joy, and I was really struggling to find that joy going into the second one. And I think I was just a lot more afraid. Like, I think it was.
Yeah, and it definitely took a process, to want to be excited about a second transfer. But even then, going into it, it wasn't the same.
Yeah, and even before that transfer, it had been suggested that we adopt more embryos. And so we'd gone back through the matching phase again, matched with another couple. And so, armed with the biggest amount of hope that we could and the best muster of excitement, I feel like, we showed up to transfer day. And it was interesting. It felt very different than our first transfer. And I told Perry after we got to the bed, I was like, I think something's wrong. And he was like, why would you say that? And I was like, I just have a gut feeling like something's not right. And soon enough, Dr. Keenan came in and actually told us that they were having that. They were struggling with the survivability of our embryos, and that we had lost a lot so far in the thawing process. And I was like, how many does that mean? And he was like, I haven't talked to Carol. I don't know the exact numbers. And so immediately, we were very grateful that we had decided to go back and adopt more embryos, because it would have been very likely we would have walked away that day with no transfer if we hadn't have done that. And then so I feel like the next hour was just kind of spent praying, but also just really leaving it up to God and being like, I don't know if we're going to walk out of here with good quality embryos or any quality embryos. It was really a test of faith, I feel like, right there from the day of transfer. Before we left, we had transferred 2 good quality embryos, and just felt really, really thankful after that I felt like it was almost like a miracle that we even got that.
Right? Yeah, in fact, that was kind of the first step, because kind of like Sydney said, I don't remember what term I was using going in. I like the term cautiously optimistic. We've used that a lot throughout this process. And then I think we walked in, it felt different walking in. We felt, I guess, seasoned, not calloused, but seasoned.
Yeah.
And then, for that, to get that news, I know for me personally, it was hard not to verge on, the edge of cynical at that point.
Yeah,
that's a whole other story with my personality anyway. So just to kind of gone through that whole gamut of feelings rather quickly, you kind of feel it a little bit.
Yeah, but it did leave us in a unique sense to feel very thankful when we walked out of that transfer day, that we were even able to have a transfer and have 2 good quality embryos from it. And so then, it's the horrendous wait until you're baby. It's just the hardest part of transfer, I think. And the first beta came back, and I was hoping for a number around 100, and it came back at 69. And so, Linda calls and does the like, congratulations, like, you're pregnant. And I was like, how pregnant, Linda? How pregnant am I? And when she told me the number 69, I was kind of like,
It's like,
I was like, that's like barely pregnant. It's like what I had in my mind. And Linda was like, no, it's like, it's good. We want it to be at least 60. And I was like, okay. And, I just had done way too much Googling. And so for the next 48 hours, like, I was already like, I was a math major in college. So I was already way into the statistics of the likelihood that a pregnancy was going to happen with, a beta of 69 on the first draw, like way too much time with Google and way not enough time with Jesus for the next 48 hours.
this is why they tell you not to do
Yes,
that.
to not do that.
We knew better.
And I was, taking home pregnancy tests at the same time too. And the line wasn't getting any darker. And I had told Perry, I was like, I do not have a good feeling about this at all. And so 48 hours later, our number came back at 68, which is not good. So
No, you want it to double.
Yeah. And so the fact that it, it practically stayed the same. Like you could say it went down, but really it stayed the same. And I was telling Perry, I was like, I just didn't know that like is possible. I was like, it's weird. It feels like whatever is happening inside of me isn't growing, but it's not dying either. And I just like, I don't know like what to make of this. And, Linda called and she explained like the news is not good. But she was like, there is a chance that this pregnancy like could still remain. Like we want to, give it a little bit more time, stay on your meds. So we stayed on the meds for 72 more hours, got another blood draw, and the numbers had gone up a little bit then, but not near. They were like half of what they should have been at that point if they were supposed to be doubling every 48. And so she called at that point, and that was a hard phone call, obviously. And, that's like, I think the interesting thing about fertility in general is that, like you get these phone calls at work. And that one, I couldn't get Perry, like he was caught up with something. So it's just, it's just different. So then I'm like getting this phone call alone and having to process, and the words that were used were that this pregnancy was non-viable. And that I needed to discontinue my medicine and that I would soon start bleeding again. And I was just thinking like the whole time I was thinking like, this cannot be happening again. Like, I cannot believe this is happening again. And I asked her at that point, because again, I'd spent too much time on Google, and that my numbers were so wonky, like they were weird, that they were kind of going up, but not healthily. I asked her, I said, is there a chance this pregnancy is ectopic? And she said, that's very rare, but Dr. Keenum does want to keep an eye on it. We need to make sure we're continuing some more blood draws and make sure that your levels do go down. And I was like, okay. So that was on a Monday, and we were just devastated that night. There's really no other word, devastated. And Wednesday, we took the afternoon off of work. We went up to the mountains, went on a hike, and just sat there and tried to process like everything that was happening to us and just our emotions around it. And on the way home, I asked Perry, I said, will you stop and get another pregnancy test? And he was like, why are you doing that? And I was like, I want to make sure these levels have gone down. I was like, I'm really afraid it's ectopic. And I was like, I just have a weird feeling like I want another pregnancy test. So I took one the next morning. The line was darker than it had ever been. So I'm like, I think I actually called the clinic first thing that morning, and I couldn't get Linda. So I talked to you, and I was like, no, I need Linda to call me back like today. I need somebody to call me back. And like, I tried to tell her that I think my levels have gone up, but I'm pretty sure she said like, no, that's impossible. I was like, Linda, I really feel like they've gone up. And so she's like, well, let's get another blood draw and we'll see. And so then on that Friday, I had another blood draw, and the levels came back well within the doubling range. Like we were looking at but they were very low still, because my numbers had started out low. I think they were like 600 that day. And I think most people for where I would be at in pregnancy should be like 3,000 or something. So at that point, the words were still non-viable. And I was just like, I hear that And I was like, but whatever's happening, like whatever life is inside of me is not dying. And I feel like I have to give it a fighting chance. And I said, so I know it could be ectopic. What's the risk of me going back on my medicine? And so we kind of talked back and forth through that. It's a calculated risk. But we started meds back through the weekend, and she's like, you got to get another blood draw on Monday. And so I did. They came back higher again. And at that point, Dr. Keenan's like, we need like an emergency ultrasound, pretty much was like, get an ultrasound as soon as you can, because we need to figure out what's happening here. And so that was like a weird time frame, because it was like, I'm pregnant, but I didn't feel like, I felt like I was carrying a child that we were never going to be able to meet. And that was hard. Like that's emotionally really, really hard.
And that was Mother's Day weekend too.
Yeah, Mother's Day weekend.
So.
And yeah, it was just really emotional and trying to process all of that. And so I was calling around frantically trying to find somewhere that would get me an ultrasound that day. And I got an appointment, and I called Perry, and I was like, you got to come home from work. Like I got to go to this ultrasound. And gosh, I think the whole time there, I think I cried to you on the way there. And I just said, I was like, I feel like whatever it was, this sounds really terrible, but I feel like we were kind of playing this like game of pretending I was pregnant. And I was like, and I feel like that's going to be shattered today. Like, I feel like we're going to walk in, and it's either going to be, because in my mind, an ectopic pregnancy would have been, I did not want to have to be put in a situation to terminate a pregnancy. But it's dangerous to me. It would have been life-threatening to me. So when it, and impossible for the baby to ever have life from it. So I was just like, I feel like we're just going to get the worst. And I was like, or there's, there are a lot of things that it could have been. And I was prepared for all of those, except for what we actually saw in that ultrasound.
And so, yeah, when we went in, like, it was one thing getting the appointment. That was a huge blessing, and it made the world a whole lot smaller. It was, it was a doctor that we didn't know, but like she went to our church.
Yeah.
It was actually at, but sorry, yeah, so what led it to, yeah, it just adds that much. We saw, an ultrasound tech doesn't know our story. She takes us back. She hooks up the ultrasound, gets looking. She's like, all right, here's your baby.
And I was like,
You're
our
right.
baby.
She's like, yeah, it's just right here. Hold on a second.
So I start like sobbing, right? And she's like, no, hold still so I can get the heartbeat. And I was like, hold still. I was like, I'm like trying to process what just happened.
And I mean, I've seen a handful of ultrasounds over the last few years. And so it's like, I could see the bladder. I could see the uterus. It's like, there's something new there.
And he's like, I've never seen that before.
Yeah. And so when she's like, yeah, there's the baby. I'm like, and that's in the uterus. This isn't,
yeah.
I know what I'm looking at the uterus. Like, that is in the uterus.
And when she told me to like hold still, Perry was like, I'm sorry, we've waited a long time for this. She's going to need a moment.
And sure enough, she does the heartbeat. And like I said, this ultrasound tech, she didn't know who we were, didn't know our story.
Yeah.
Just as nonchalant, as routine as it was, just.
Yeah. And it was early. That was,
yeah.
I was 6 weeks one day then. And so the heart rate had barely started. We couldn't hear it, but they could see it on the screen. And
What was measuring a couple days?
It was measuring a couple days behind, which made me really nervous. But gosh, we walked out of the room that day, and I told Perry, I was like, I'm desperately praying that we get to meet this child face to face one day. But if we don't, we've already seen a miracle. And that was like that, I was like, that's like, I just feel like a conviction in a way. I was like, every day I get to carry this pregnancy. You get to support all of it. I was like, every day that like is another day pregnant, I feel like it's another day living a miracle. And then we had another ultrasound at 8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a nervous wreck again heading into that one. And the baby grown so much. I was like, oh my gosh, it's so much bigger. Strong heart rate, measuring perfectly on track. And now we're 10 weeks pregnant today. And, it's still hard to not be really nervous. And I want to know like what's happening in there. But considering I don't feel great all day long, I'm also trying to be reassured. That's probably a good sign. And yeah, so sorry, that was probably really long, but it's, I think you said like it's borderline a miracle, but for us, it has really felt like a true miracle that we've gotten to experience this.
Well, it first of all, yes, congratulations. I mean,
Thank you.
we're so thrilled for you guys. I mean, it's really an answer to a whole lot of prayer. So a couple of things. First of all, it's okay that you took a long time to explore that. That basically is this episode of the podcast. It's an amazing story to tell. You got to take some time to tell a story like that. So you're totally well within your rights to do that. And I'm glad you took your time with it. It is amazing. So that's the first thing, is we are just, man, so thrilled for you guys. Cause honestly, I've been doing this for a while now, and I've never heard of this happening. There was just some inner voice inside of you, Sydney, that said, I really think I need to keep taking these medicines, not discontinue the medication. And it's awesome that in this case you listened to that, you got the medical checkups, you knew you were taking a calculated risk. The second thing I want to say, and you guys can speak to this as well, I do want to point out that you don't necessarily want to take this particular episode of the podcast as instructive. It is a wonderful story, but what we are not saying is that Dr. Keenan, in advising you to discontinue the meds, made a wrong decision, or that it is always the right decision to take, or ever a right decision to take a calculated risk. We think this is an amazing story of God working through the NEDC, and we're glad he's working the way that he is. But there are certainly times, please hear this, when you're told to discontinue your medication, you need to do it. I mean, that could, as you mentioned, if you have an ectopic pregnancy or a tubal or something, the physician is acting in your best interest. So please heed that advice. And nobody's saying Dr. Keenan made the wrong decision. And you guys, before we even started the podcast, you even brought it up to me. I had it in the back of my mind as we started this, of course, since I work for the organization, but you wanted to convey that as well. You've even had friends say, wow, did the physician tell you to do the right thing?
Yeah, we had friends that were kind of like, well, do you think he made the wrong call? Like, this was like back, like before the ultrasound, like before, when I told my friends, I was like, we're going off meds. And they were like, oh, like that just seems strange to do that when the numbers keep going up. And I had told them, I was like, it's not the wrong call. I was like, you know, we chose the NEDC to have one of the best doctors in the country doing this process for us. And, you know, Dr. Keenan had been great. Our first transfer had been canceled due to medical reasons. The second one, you know, ended in a chemical pregnancy. We've been with Dr. Keenan for a while. And like, even with the chemical pregnancy one, like they, you know, just always gave us a fighting chance for the lives of those embryos. And never once did we question that, or do we question that? And so, yeah, you know, it was just really interesting. I mean, not interesting. It was just absolutely miraculous. You know, like everything that I was reading in my Googling and my non-medical expertise at all. You know, I was telling Carrie, I was like, we're in a lose-lose situation here. I was like, you know, they're saying I can stay on my medicine through the weekend, but like, this is not going to work out. And I was like, I don't want you to feel like it's going to work out. Like, I felt like I had to protect us in that. And like I said, I mean, we walked into that first ultrasound expecting everything except for what we saw. So, yeah.
What was going through your mind when you both saw and began to grasp the reality of what you were seeing on the ultrasound?
Gosh, I think I was just like I was completely shocked. And then we walk out of the room, and what the ultrasound tech referred to you as dad. Yeah. And Perry looks at me, and I was like, I don't know. I was like, this is, and like, we walk out of the clinic. I think we just stood in the parking lot for a second. And Perry was like, what do we do now? Like, who do we tell? Do we just go home and go back to work? And I was like, I don't know. I was like, I've never been here. Like, I've never been pregnant. I've never been.
Like, how do you drive a pregnant person? Like,
I mean, it was just like, I shocked. I mean, just completely shocked. And then, like I said, I just felt this like immediate conviction of like, no matter the outcome, we have already seen a miracle. And I felt so grateful. And like, truthfully, a little bit unworthy too. Like, I was like, I don't know why we deserve this miracle happening to us. And the truth is, nobody could ever deserve it, right? Like it's nobody could ever deserve or earn it. And I just completely grateful. Like probably the best, shocked and grateful.
Perry, you have anything to add to that?
No, I mean, I was just felt numb, like seeing like I said, seeing something new on the ultrasound. I couldn't tell you what was what, at a certain point, but it's like, I know I've never seen that there. It's usually just an empty void. And so, but yeah, hearing it, it's just surreal, definitely kind of went numb for a second. It's like, wow, this is it. It's here. And, but yeah, a surreal, sublime excitement.
First time parents. Amazing.
Yeah, it's just different than what we expected. All of it obviously has been different than what we expected. But my mind, eventually we would have gotten to a point where like we had great betas and then waited for an ultrasound. And then you go to the ultrasound expecting to see, a baby there. And everything was just different than that. And so in a way, it is not the path we would have chosen because it was not easy by any means, but one that has definitely glorified the Lord over and over and over. And that's been really neat to see him come through.
Well, you mentioned it, you said, who are we to deserve this? And then you immediately made the important theological point, who are any of us to deserve any of the good things we've been given. We serve a God of grace, and he can still work, and sometimes still does work supernaturally. And you're right. I mean, what a great story that glorifies him. We don't see the supernatural very often anymore. We don't see him working like we read about in the Old Testament and parts of the New Testament. But I don't know. I think he still does, and certainly in other parts of the world, you hear about it more. And I don't know, maybe it tells us something about our mindset as Westerners. Maybe we should expect more, and maybe more people will after hearing this podcast. So you guys are 10 weeks along. We've come to the end of this episode, but I can tell you, you're going to have probably a whole lot. I know you have a ton of people praying for you already. Yes. After all the folks who hear this, you're going to have a lot more people praying for you. And I'm looking forward to keeping track of your journey and then talking with you guys once, we've finally reached 30 more weeks and we're seeing a picture of your baby. And I am prayerfully, hopefully believing that that's going to happen. It's just an amazing story. And I want to thank you guys for sharing it with us. This is just really an amazing encouragement. And I had never heard anything like that. So please, if you're watching, listening, keep Perry and Sydney Walden and their first baby in your prayers. So if you want to know more about embryo adoption, just go to our website, embryodonation.org, embryodonation.org. We're at the National Embryo Donation Center in Knoxville, Tennessee. I'm Mark Mellinger, and this has been the Embryo Adoption Podcast.